Hello, everyone, and welcome to a series of pre-event speaker interviews in the run-up to our World Hydrogen North America Congress. This is taking place in Houston this year from the 31st of March for 3 days. My name is Dominic Coyne. I'm the program director. And today we are joined here by Oleksiy Tatarenko. Oleksiy is the senior principal in the Climate Aligned Industries program at RMI. He leads the Hydrogen Initiative and the Green Hydrogen Catapult, a global coalition dedicated to accelerating the adoption of green hydrogen to meet climate goals. Oleksiy also brings an extensive experience from his previous role as Deputy Country Chair for Shell in Ukraine. This is where he led the company's energy transition program. We're excited to hear your insights today, Oleksiy, on the future of hydrogen and the energy transition. So welcome, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Dom, and pleasure to be here. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion and the event itself. I think World Hydrogen, North America is coming, at an interesting time, a time of changes and hopefully, some greater certainty for the industry in North America and globally too. So I'm really looking forward to the event and some interesting discussion there at the end of March, beginning of April in Houston.
Agreed. It is a very interesting time. The audience won't know when we're recording this, but it is fairly recently after Trump's inauguration. So there's lots of pieces being moved around the chessboard already. Oleksiy, to give our audience a bit of more of a background about yourself and your interest in the hydrogen space, could you tell us a bit about your career and your hopes and what you hope to get out of the hydrogen event coming up?
So to build up maybe on your introduction here, of course, I spent, a large chunk of my career in the biggest, European energy company. And as you said, for 5 years, I've been leading the energy transition program in the company under the executive committee. And then I moved to, during COVID time, to RMI and joined a great RMI team to essentially build the set of hydrogen initiatives about 3 years ago. So after living for a significant chunk of my professional life in Europe, I moved across Atlantic and started building RMI team, which is given RMI background as a global think, do, and scale tank. Of course, has a center of gravity in the United States, but over the year truly built the global team, which spans through Europe and Asia and countries like India and China. And not that long ago, we opened the office in Nigeria. So it's a truly global team, and the same applies here to the hydrogen team, which is about 40 people, with the majority of folks being here in North America, but also footprint in Asia, Europe, and Africa markets, right? The way how we've set up the team has always been around the priority sectors. We've got the team that is looking at chemicals, ammonia, fertilizer. We've got the team that is looking at iron and steel, as we believe that hydrogen will play a significant role in the primary steel production as a decarbonization solution. And finally, we've got the teams that are looking at transportation sectors, and shipping team in particular has been growing really fast in the past couple of years, in anticipation of what we would expect will be progressive regulations coming out of IMO in April this year. We are looking at aviation and role of hydrogen-based fuels there, or so-called ESAF, electric sustainable aviation fuels. And then we also look at the cross-cutting solutions and infrastructure that will be needed to enable all this the transition in all these sectors, but also spend a lot of our focus and time on how to get the demand going, right? And not only through the policy interventions, but through market-based mechanisms such as buyers alliances and book and claim systems and other mechanisms. So that's on a nutshell a bit more about me and the team.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And obviously, you touched a bit there on the demand side and the different teams you now have at RMI, and this is going to be a huge feature of our event. We're going to have a dedicated stream looking specifically at the demand industries and where the demand is going to come from. And this also plays into your speaking role that you're going to have at the event. You've kindly agreed to join us on two different topical areas, one of them being the big plenary debate of the day, which is looking at the domestic versus international demand side dilemma. Oleksiy, I know you're going to give us a domestic perspective and bias, perhaps. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about what you're hoping to get out of that panel and your opinions there that the audience can look forward to?
So to start with, I maybe will state the obvious here, recognizing that demand is key, right, to unlock everything else, right, the rest of the value chain. And of course, I'm looking forward to discuss this topic and the balance between domestic and international, as you highlighted there, Dom, particularly for the US and from the US perspective, right? I think if you look at the global picture and from purely fundamentals perspective, I think it's a no-brainer that certain regions in the US are primed to be exporters of clean hydrogen. I mean, clean, embracing both green and blue, if you were to use the color coding, and the fundamentals are very strong for the Gulf Coast in particular, where you've got the infrastructure, you've got a very good and very strong renewables potential and ability to produce renewables at a very low cost. And same with blue hydrogen. You've already got CO2 infrastructure. You've got big projects moving. If you talk about CCS, and most importantly, I mean, same with hydrogen infrastructure. Thousands of miles of hydrogen infrastructure, which is already exists out there, right? And most importantly, strong drive, of course, and history of exporting energy from that region, right? So it's in a way non-brainer that export will be happening, right? Then, of course, and that's where I think the position that I'll be arguing that in that debate, domestic comes into play. At the very same time, you've got a lot of industry that is based there on the Gulf Coast, in the states like Texas and Louisiana and etc. That needs to be decarbonized. And we at RMI spent a lot of time in the past couple of years working on a Clean Industrial Hub program on the Gulf Coast, looking at this potential and the pathways to decarbonize those industries, right? And from our perspective, it's crucially important for the US and competitiveness of the American industry to get the balance right between export potential and domestic journey, because again, lots of these clean products will be exported, but lots of these products also have demand or will have demand in the domestic market, right? Now, then we come to the question which we need to solve about how do we get going in a number of these sectors, right? How do we close the gap between the willingness to pay for, in our case, for clean hydrogen and the cost, right? And there I would say that we've laid some strong foundation in the past 3 years as the industry. We've got some strong incentives on the supply side. We've got a hydrogen hub. I mean, as we will be in Texas, I will stay on the Gulf Coast. We've got the hydrogen hubs, which has two components in that program. There are already a number of industrials who are involved into that hub, and then there is a demand side component which aims to stimulate demand specifically. The interesting discussion that we will need to have on the day is that enough to get to scale and on time, right? And there we see the role for market-based mechanisms. We also see a big role for the states potentially to play, and I'm happy to unpack exactly the thinking there. But the bottom line here is that this is not only the question of decarbonization, this is a question of competitiveness of the industry and industrial policy. It's a question of new jobs and building up on what is already there, and finally it's of course a question of economic development for the region. So looking forward to discuss how to get this right.
And I'm glad you got in there the mention of also looking at the market-driven approach there, because that's obviously a presentation that you're going to be giving on the last day as well. And I think you're absolutely right. Obviously, there are going to be some areas that are primed for export over keeping things domestic. But as you say, getting the balance right is the interesting point that I think everyone's gonna want to answer in joining us at the event. So if I may, Oleksiy, we've got one more question, and it's a bit more of a controversial one for the audience. So let me know what you think. So Oleksiy, the push for green hydrogen is being heralded as a game changer in the global energy transition. But some critics argue that the focus on hydrogen could divert attention and resources and other potentially more viable renewable energy solutions away. Given your leadership in the Green Hydrogen Catapult, how do you respond to those who believe that hydrogen is being oversold as the solution to climate change?
Let me start with recognizing that calibration is helpful. I mean, in this market and in these realities, I to a certain extent will agree with some of the critics who are saying that hydrogen was oversold as a solution, by people who were using, the unhelpful metaphors such as, Swiss knife of energy transition. I mean, you've probably heard, and many heard this metaphor in a number of conferences. Yeah, I have Swiss knife too, but how often do I use it and for what is the question, right? And at RMI, I think our view all the way along in the past 3 years was that hydrogen is an important part of the solution and has a big role to play in the heavy industry and heavy transportation sectors. And then there are some other use cases which are less clear and quite often geographically dependent, right? That also need to be considered, right? And then there are use cases that shouldn't be considered at all because the direct electric solution can do their job perfectly there, and light duty vehicles is a great example of that, right? So in a way, and I've already mentioned how we've set up our team 3 years ago, right? That was about around those heavy industry sectors, chemicals, ammonia, fertilizer, iron and steel on the one hand, and on the other hand, heavy transportation sectors such as shipping and aviation, right? And I feel like this is where we are coming now as the industry, realization that, hey, these are the prime sectors that we need to focus on. This is where hydrogen will have the biggest impact from decarbonization perspective and other perspectives. And this is where we can get to scale, which also matters for driving the costs down and making the transition being more affordable, right? So in a way, my response is that I agree with some fair critical voices that were out there, but I also feel that from our perspective, at least, nothing has changed in terms of our approach. Hydrogen remains being an important part of the solution. Whether this is going to be 10% of the overall solution or 15%, that remains to be seen. I think what's important for us is to start getting to scale in these key sectors, and see first big commercial scale projects happening, and they're happening, right? I mean, and I just want to also recognize that despite all the headwinds that industry has been experienced because of regulatory uncertainty and some macroeconomic dynamics in the past, I would say 18 months in particular, we see big projects moving. I mean, take NEOM in the Saudi Arabia. This is like $5 billion, that 2 GW ammonia projects. That's significant, right? I mean, or take Stagra, what used to be H2 Green Steel, right, with its 6.5 billion project in Sweden. They are putting steel into the ground, and that's going to make it a huge difference, right? I mean, in terms of showing the way to the rest of the industry in those sectors, how these things can be done, but also driving the cost down. So I'm cautiously optimistic with this recalibration, and increased focus now on the heavy industry and heavy transportation, that we are moving in the right direction. And maybe the only other thing that I would say is that in terms of thinking about the same question from the risk mitigation perspective, a lot has been done by the policymakers too, right? I mean, I think the European Union got it right through the RFNBO delegated acts, and I think they should hold the line there and stay the course. Maybe some small things can be changed here and there, but largely this is a very solid piece of regulation. And same on the US side, right? The 45V guidance came out. I think it's a great guidance. I mean, the policymakers did a lot of work to strike the right balance there and put the relief valves, etc., and enough of flexibility on the one hand, and on the other hand put enough of guardrails to ensure that hydrogen will go to the right use cases, that taxpayers' money will be used wisely, right? And again, it took 18 months to put that solid piece of regulation in place. So I guess my main message there for the policymakers on the both sides of the Atlantics would be, let's get going now. Let's build up on this foundation and, you know, get these industries to scale. And let's not make, you know, perfect to be the enemy of good.
Yeah, yeah. Some very good points there. And for the audience's knowledge, each of those industries that you've mentioned, the heavy industry, the mobility, ammonia, we're going to be covering all of them separately in the program, as well as how we're going to go about doing this at scale. So, Oleksiy, I want to thank you for your answers and your opinions. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but audience, if you want to hear more from Oleksiy, he's going to be speaking on the 1st and 2nd of April. And by all means, check out our website as well. You can see our other speakers and the rest of the program. And Oleksiy, I want to thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Dom, and thank you everyone who listened to this conversation. And I'm looking forward to see lots of familiar faces in Houston at the end of March.
Absolutely. Thanks again, and thank you for listening, audience, and we'll see you in Houston.